What's up, everybody? We are the As Above, So Below podcast. My name is Gunnar, my co host Andrew. Today we have a wonderful conversation that's going to come before you, and it's going to come before us because we're recording this live. We're talking to Ben Entenman. He is a friend of Andrew, but now he's a friend of mine. And we're going to dive into his story. We're going to figure out all these things we'd like to know. What does strength look like? What does it mean to be a responsible person? All of the above and so below. That was good. Good little segue there.
Link that in there. Well, that was nice.
But if you're listening to this episode, we really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. We love having these conversations with our friends and listeners. And without further ado, Andrew, I'll let you kick it off.
Awesome. Thanks for that introduction, Gunnar. So, Ben is a good friend of mine. Him and I have known each other for a little less than 2 years now, although our roots go back to the Strong Coach program. That's where we both have developed and grown tremendously as individuals. And I thought Ben was the perfect person to bring on as a guest to share his story and share his experiences of growth in his life. So, Ben, thank you for coming on. We're going to go ahead and start off with your backstory, learn a little about you, learn a little bit about from where you've come from. So I'm curious, Ben, where are you from?
Thanks for having me on, Andrew and Gunnar. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. Grew up there, lived kind of primarily in two homes in East Portland, one in Southeast, one in Northeast, and yeah, that's where my roots are still pretty deep. I left them, 2009. So it's been quite some time since I've lived there full time, but will always consider myself a native Portlander, even though it's changed a lot since I've lived there. So yeah, that's the home story, and yeah, where do we want to dive in? Just a little more history around kind of education.
Where are you at now?
I'm currently in Bend, Oregon, so I went from the northwest corner of the state to smack dab in the middle. Moved over here in 2016 after coming back from Abu Dhabi, where I spent my last 2 years of my formal teaching career, teaching English and physical education.
Right on. So,
Right on. So you spent time. All right, you spent time in Abu Dhabi. What were things that led you to that point?
So yeah, like I mentioned, was a teacher. I taught English and PE over there. I was a teacher for 2 years prior to that here in Oregon, and finished up my master's at U of O in 2011, and then did my first full year of teaching pretty much just as a full-time substitute. So it's pretty cutthroat out there in the teaching world in that part of the state. There's two other master's programs that are just kind of feeding teachers into that area. So it's tough to get a full-time gig your first year, but I was pretty fortunate to have fostered some good relationships with the teachers that I did my practicums and my placements with in my master's program. So was able to kind of be a first call for a handful of folks that kept me pretty busy. And then about 2 weeks before the school year started, the second year, I got a call from a teeny little school district up in the western mountains outside of Eugene, Springfield area called Oak Ridge. And I taught in Oak Ridge, which was a very rural experience compared to the more kind of like suburban. And I mean, Eugene is still a fairly small town city, I guess. But this town is like 3,000, 4,000 people. So it's a very small, very tight community. And when you're not a resident there, it takes a little bit more to build relationships. And that was very clear. It was one of the first times that I kind of realized the importance of developing relationships beyond just those that I was serving directly as their teacher, also their parents, my colleagues, and it's they say your first full-time year of teaching is one of the hardest years of your life, and they're not kidding. It's a ton of new stuff, and you're thrown into the water and see if you can swim with what you got. And your job is to make sure you stay afloat and you keep the others around you that you're responsible for ahead of you as well. So it was a huge learning experience. Really grateful for the opportunity as I was to go abroad and get to teach at an international school, which was sort of the polar opposite other end of the spectrum from a small rural community school in Oak Ridge. And really what those 4 years of teaching showed me was how important following my calling as a teacher and as a coach is to me in my life, and also that the traditional classroom was not the place for it. So coming back from that last year in Abu Dhabi, I knew that I was ready for a change.
Well, you ready
Amazing.
for a change, and I mean, I know your change it was a big change for you, Ben, right? So where was that change, and
Yeah.
where was the next step or next chapter in your story?
Yeah, so coming back, that change looked like moving into the coaching space, and I'd had really amazing experiences as a young athlete with bodywork and massage therapy. My mom was a therapist, so I was introduced to it very early on, and as a collegiate athlete, was just always in the training room wanting to recover better so that I could train more and hopefully perform better. And so I knew how powerful that could be as uh, a way to help athletes. And I'd been doing CrossFit coaching for about 4 or 5 years at that point, just kind of on the side in addition to my teaching career. And it was a great way to plug into the gyms and to continue to get to teach something that was a lot of fun for me to teach and coach, and really help me develop those relationships with other people and hone my craft a bit more as well. As much as I enjoy teaching, I also really enjoy the process of learning from those that I'm teaching. And sometimes I think they teach me more than I teach them, but that's just a part of it, right? So I decided to go into a massage therapy program that was here in Bend. That's where I moved back, like I said, from Abu Dhabi to, and yeah, just sort of put my nose to the grindstone for a year and got the program done, and right away started up an LLC, Revive Bodywork and Personal Training, and that's what I've been doing ever since. It's had its ups and downs of full-time, part-time, as a contractor in other facilities. And yeah, through those iterations has come out to be where I'm at now, which is currently operating out of my garage gym studio. And it's been really fun the last 4 or 5 months to build up the practice truly independently out of my own space and get to cultivate things really the way that I've come to see my style evolve to, as far as serving my clients and helping people get out of pain.
Very cool. How would you describe your style?
I'd say my style is a mix of sort of soft tissue interventions, which are mainly designed to facilitate awareness in the nervous system. And a lot of times that awareness is down regulating tension that's been holding from either like just repetitive movement patterns that have created strain in an area, tissue that has started to shift its actual state as a result of being strained for a long period of time, and then using those soft tissue inputs along with teaching people to actively input into their own tissue through things like controlled articular rotations or CARs, through some other techniques and protocols in the functional range systems methodology, which is what I'm trained in as a mobility specialist. I did that in 2018, and that really was a jump off point more into the realm of joint specific training and internal training, which has been become a bigger and bigger part of my style and how I've blended the soft tissue work alongside it to really create the kind of unique offering as a coach that I specialize in.
Right on. I'm curious too, Ben. You start accumulating all these new skills, these new coaching tactics along the way. when did you believe in yourself enough to go all in on this Revive bodywork?
I don't know if I truly believed it until I made the decision to step out from under the roofs of other facilities, out of partnerships with those gyms from a marketing perspective, really. I mean, when you're under somebody's roof, you have access to their people. And when you're operating out of your own space, you got to find a way to let people know about you. And that's such a huge part of developing a sustainable business model is how do people learn about your work, and how do you communicate the value of it so that people can hear that offering. So yeah, I mean, I would really say, like, truly about in the last 6 months, I came back from a bit of a 5 week sabbatical that I took last fall, after I left the last facility that I had been working out of. And that's kind of when I made the decision that coming back, I was going to go all in on myself and um, build it out of what I have now, which is a garage gym studio. And there's a lot of pretty great companies that have started out of a garage. So I'm not in too bad a company if I end up like Apple or Microsoft in 20 years.
Right on, right on. I'd say we'll be early investors.
There it is.
Mm-hmm.
You guys can have some steak.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, Ben, that was really cool to hear about your career. I'm curious, like, what are the next steps as far as that go? Is there something on the horizon for you, or is that kind of on the low? Where's the future vision look like, or what does the future vision look like?
Well, there's kind of the short term and the midterm, and then the long term goals. Is all three of us know about setting goals when it comes to kind of stacking out how they're going to build into each other, and then also give you something in the here and now to concentrate on, as sort of those micro steps to get to those bigger goals. So the short term goal is to create this online platform that's essentially going to be um, a two-tiered membership option for people to either choose their own adventure with movement and mobility training, and then those who are looking for a little bit more curated experience with somebody to guide them through. So I already do some remote training with people, and this will really be a helpful tool to increase my capacity to help more by having more additional support for them through the platform. And then also be a way to continue to expand um, teaching the system, or the methodology, the style, I guess, of training that is how I like to train and how I like to teach people to train themselves. And it all starts with moving pain free and understanding pain and discomfort is communication from the nervous system to our conscious mind, and how that affects our training experience. So beyond the platform, that's something I hope to get done in the next quarter or two. Sort of by the end of third quarter is the deadline that I've set for myself on that. And then just the other piece is really just tightening up the ship of this little independent one man operation that is happening out of the garage gym studio right now. And uh, I would love to grow into a standalone facility that I could start to bring other practitioners, whether they're other movement coaches, other holistic health practitioners, just really start to build out this vision that I have had. And I don't really know if it's something that I truly want to work toward long term right now, but the idea of a multimodal health facility and having movement training be the center of it, but have all the resources around recovery, stress management, diet, sleep, all those types of things integrated in some way where at least people know where to direct questions that come out of the membership or those people that we're serving. So that's a quantum leap ahead of becoming just a standalone facility. But if anything, I'm a visionary, and I've always had that big imagination, and so it's not hard for me to get there.
Very cool.
That's super cool. I really appreciate the idea of creating a holistic practice, and I imagine the create your own adventure aspect is very much that for you and your clients, is really getting to know them. You have your goals for where you want to go, and then you're going to take people along that journey as well. As I'm going to have this skill in place, I'm going to implement this type of training, we're going to reassess, we're going to constantly go over where we are. It's a big thing of what Andrew and I have talked about in other episodes of, you know, in order to really set goals, you have to look back to where you've been and understand where you are now. Otherwise, it's impossible, like big word there, it's impossible to have a jumping off point if you don't know where that jumping off point is.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny that you mentioned that too. Earlier today, I was talking with a good friend of mine, and we were talking about like, oh, heck, he had this notification that came up, like a memory from 2 years ago, and he's like, he thought about it. He's like, whoa, like so much has happened in the past 2 years, and like that reflection and that opportunity to look back and think like, well, I've accomplished so much, I've done so much over the past 2 years. It's so powerful, and for me, I've noticed like whenever I can have that appreciation and that gratitude for myself, it goes a long way, because I imagine for all three of us, we're relatively high performers. We have high aspirations, obviously, like you mentioned, Ben, and it's always nice to reflect back and think about where we've come from, because it's humbling, but it also gives you this level of appreciation for where you're at and what you've been able to accomplish so far. Uh, with that being said, then you're someone who helps people become healthier and basically become their best self. And something we talk a lot about on our podcast is practices for yourself, practicing self-care, right? And when you're doing the manual therapy and the work with your clients, you obviously are giving and you're sharing a part of yourself, but something we talk about is filling up our cup first and giving from the overflow, and a lot of that comes from self-care practices. With that being said, I'm curious, um, what kind of self-care practice you have, and how has that evolved to where it's at nowadays?
Yeah, well, the quick kind of list of things that I do, I would say weekly, if not daily, would be some sort of breath work, some sort of temperature exposure, either hot or colds. Um, and then really, I mean, eating good food and maintaining a sense of mindfulness about my state of stress. We all have times, like certainly when we're with, or when I'm with clients, I'm not really doing that internal check-in with myself unless I feel something kind of get triggered, and then that's like a little bit louder of a signal to, hey, pay attention to. Um, and so really just letting my self-care practices be guided by the experience that I've had so far in figuring out what works best, and being flexible in some of the expectations that I might have around how much of something I'm going to do in a day. For example, how long am I going to train? If I get to a point where my nervous system is telling me, hey, this, like, you're not getting the benefit out of this, there's that sort of point of diminishing returns where the downside of the parabola starts. And at that point, the sooner you can realize that, the sooner you can be more efficient with your training and just call it for the day. And so having an understanding of what my goals are going into a session, are they to suss out what kind of ache or twinge or something that I'm feeling? That's been just a part of my story pretty much daily, is where's my pain coming from? Because in some way, shape, or form, there's been pretty chronic pain in my body since I was about 14, when I started having knee pain and had my first knee surgery. And we can get into that maybe later, but it's a part of my daily practice to check in with how my body is feeling, and then use the tools that I've developed through my experience to move toward the goals that I have of being pain-free. And sometimes that's more nervous system based. Sometimes I know that that's just training based, and there's going to be some discomfort that comes with putting in the energy that creates the change. So as far as like things about health, like keeping it pretty simple to those kind of basic tenets and trying to do them as well as I can. And then if things get into a really good rhythm, which they have at certain times, and certainly owning your own business, I know both you guys can appreciate the stresses that can come with unexpected twists and turns of running your show. Um, just absorbing those as another stressor that is going to demand attention, and so being honest with myself, and giving myself a little bit more grace than I'm used to. Certainly, as like an ex-athlete, and Andrew, like you said, just we're all kind of high performers. We want to live as full as we can, and that comes with a lot of effort, and sometimes moderating that effort is the work. So yeah, that was a bit of a long-winded answer to that one, but we got there.
That makes a lot of sense to me, though, Ben. I see the things that you do, the practices, things that we could be like, I'm going to write this on my schedule and go do.
Mm.
They're simple, and you use that word yourself. It's hot, cold, movement, breath work, awareness, right? Bringing it back to your center, bringing it back to yourself. And I imagine in that place of simplifying, there's some big questions that come up for you. I know for me, like when I'm preparing to train and preparing to compete, I have to come back to my center even more and more to really get to where I want to be. And that can be a metaphor for creating a business. It can be a metaphor for creating the body that's healthy and what you want. And it's also in relationships there. With that, I'm curious what your like weekly exposures to heat and cold teach you about yourself.
That's a great question, Dennis.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would say kind of the first one that jumps out at me is like putting yourself in some uncomfortable situations where your body is having to work pretty hard to stay in a parasympathetic state, right? We'll just call it like that you can stay calm enough where you're not going to upregulate yourself to the point where you are demanding a change.
Real quick, what
And
for our listeners
yeah,
who don't know what a parasympathetic state is, what
yeah,
could you explain that a little
that's
bit, or just like simplify it?
for sure. So parasympathetic is our rest, digest, relax, procreate. It's the state that we chill out in, that's kind of the least uh, has the least detriment on our body, right? When we're sympathetic or upregulated, that's when we're in fight, flight, or freeze. Those are sort of the natural responses to an incoming stressor where there has to be some sort of response on our part to either stay alive, or yeah, I guess stay alive is kind of the main one, isn't it?
Survive, right?
And so, yeah, survive, right? So Andrew, I'm glad you brought up that word, because surviving and moving into thriving is, I think, sort of the main piece of why I think state regulation is so important. It's really hard for your body to heal. I would maybe steal Gunner's word of impossible to heal in a sympathetic state when you're upregulated all the time. Your body has so many other messages coming in that are going to override like a healing response, for example. That it's going to be really hard to get the resources to where they need to go when you're in a sympathetic state. So trying to get out of that and trying to get into a more parasympathetic state and then stay there for periods of time, especially under some intentional stress. And that's where the heat exposure and the cold exposure, whether it's a cold shower, cold plunge, some time in a sauna, those are kind of my three main ways that I do heat exposure. They offer opportunities to really push the limits a little bit of what you can control in terms of your state. So like imagine that you get into a situation with somebody in a conversation where all of a sudden you're feeling really on edge or defensive, like that's a pretty good sign that you're in a sympathetic state, and it's going to be hard for you to think clearly and communicate your your feelings most effectively when you're in that state. And that's why, like, take a deep breath, try to calm down. Like, that's where all of this comes from, is state regulation. So pushing the boundaries is definitely of that, so that I have more space, right? It's like when we get stronger, we have more capacity. So it's just building more capacity to absorb stress so that I can handle more of what my life might throw at me without it being as hard on my system. So there's certainly that aspect of it. And then also the challenge of it, the discipline of it, the practice of doing something over and over when you know that it is going to be slightly uncomfortable, and then still showing up and doing it anyway because of a long-term expectation of benefit versus, oh, I don't have to go and do that right now. I can stay comfortable where I'm at. But that's only serving me in the here and now. And I mean, this is a principle that I talk about, and it's still very much a practice of trying to get better at it for me as well. So yeah, constantly striving to do the thing that I know is going to be best for what I want in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 50, 40 years, if I'm still around, hopefully. I'm only 36. That is a big part of why I think having that discipline practice is really important.
For sure. A word that comes up as you're describing that to me is tolerance. And, you know, Andrew, Ben, you guys are master coaches in terms of understanding how the mechanics of the body work, right? There's tolerance in certain joints. There's only so much degree of flexion or extension that we can get into. I like to transfer that into the psychological aspects. Like, all right, when I'm dealing with someone, if I am coming into that situation, if I'm coming to this conversation right now with some baggage of emotions that I haven't quite seen fully yet, that's that sympathetic nervous system just shouting.
Yep.
I'm not going to be able to hear you, and I'm most likely not going to hear my own thoughts because it's just bouncing around.
Right.
So practices like exposing yourself to heat and cold, you develop that tolerance of, where is my body now?
Yeah.
Where am I? What am I coming into this situation? Because it is so contrasting, or stark contrast to just what we think is homeostasis. But realistically, we're always on one side or the other, whether it's upregulated, downregulated. How do we find that space in between, or that tolerance for our best self?
And I would maybe piggyback off that with the word resilience as well, and building a level of resilience that you can absorb those incoming stressors to a greater degree, and both in like the mental, emotional, physical realms, at all kind of the same principle I think applies, that when you develop greater resilience, certainly that includes a tolerance as far as the, like, I can absorb this without it really changing my state, but can I also, to sort of circle back to the surviving versus thriving, can I then get myself into a position where I'm being able to express like my creativity, my ingenuity, those ways of thinking that are going to help me produce more than just what's going to get me through today. And even if that's a long-term process, having the ability to resist doing the things for immediate gratification and satisfaction, at least most of the time.
For sure. I like what you said there. You brought up creativity, and it's really difficult to be creative when you're in that stressed, sympathetic state, right? So I imagine building these capacities up to handle the stressors, allowing you to stay more parasympathetic or in that rest digest state for longer, is all going to benefit your ability to be creative, which is, I imagine, and I can say from experience too, is one of the best states to be in. And we're
Yeah,
curious, Ben,
for sure.
about creativity. Um, where do you get the opportunity to express creativity in your life?
Yeah, this is a fun question. It's where the interconnectedness of what I've chosen to pursue as a career will kind of have a thread all the way into sort of the main thing, which I'm really enjoying being creative right now from an activity perspective, is mountain biking and being in a state of flow where on the bike, on those two wheels, on a single track trail out in the mountains, time stops and slows down and disappears essentially, and you're really just in the present. And I love the speed of it. I love the aspect of balance and working together with another implement being the bike, and really learning how to ride these new full suspension spaceships, which are so different than my hardtail that I had back when I was in my early 20s. Um, but to start off, I mean, every time I train is an opportunity for me to be creative, because I'm using my understanding of how I'm experiencing sensation as communication in my body to hear what it's saying it needs, and then to do that um, in different ways. And only different ways, because you do something the same way every time, eventually you're going to get good at it. That's a law of specificity, which is part of the FRS system. You get better at the things that you do more. And this is just like any sort of skill training. But with this, it's the skill of movement. And so trying to continually expand both the range and the space that I can move in, and then also the quality of how I move in that space and the control of it. And so just time under tension at varying levels and in varying positions. All of these pieces are aspects of why I really love this system and the style that I've kind of developed in it, because it does allow me to be so creative. Every person can be unique in their experience, as far as how I train them, and a lot of people respond well to the same things. So that's where sort of uh, systems of training and methodologies get built around these sort of best practice stimuluses that we can exert to create a desired outcome. And so when the desired outcome is just pain-free movement, I get to be as creative as I feel like that day. If I feel like just kind of getting through and doing what I need to do, I go to stuff that I know really well and that maybe require a little bit less engagement and presence in figuring out what I'm doing. I just know where to go. I know what I'm trying to feel for, and I'm just going to go ahead and use that as my protocol for that day. Versus if I'm feeling a little bit more creative and exploratory, I might try some different base positions, some different body positions to do some movement in, to um, create force in, and to express workspace, which is that idea of a healthy joint has um, uh, the workspace that it can express, and to varying levels of degree dictate how healthy that joint is. Um, so then move that all the way into patterns like squats and deadlifts and running and jumping and then getting on a bike. So there's this continuance of creativity that happens all the way through my life, because that's just how I've trained myself to not train myself. It's how I've learned to be. It's not even a thought process anymore. It's just kind of how I walk around.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. You live it.
Yeah. Every day is an AMRAP. How many reps can I do?
So with that idea of doing the reps, question that we love asking our guests is, in your mind, what does it mean to be strong?
This was a question I remember from the email of questions. I was like, that's another good one. What does it mean to be strong? I think we've touched on some of the descriptors that I would use to describe strength, which is resilience, tolerance. I really think it depends on how you're measuring strength. Like that will also determine sort of what the description of strong in a specific strengths context is. Um, we've touched on aspects of like emotional and personal development, and there's absolutely a type of strength that comes from being able to absorb things like uh, feedback, criticism, whether it's constructive. I mean, hopefully it is, but oftentimes it's not the case. But being able to have a level of resilience and trust in yourself that even though you're gonna fail, as in probably not do the thing that you want to do as well as you want to do it when you do it, um, even as an athlete, like you ask people when they win a championship, they're going to go watch film, they're going to go try and get better, they're going to do that work of reflecting on how they perform so that they can try and up their game the next time. And I think that is an element of strength that is a really cool carryover from life into something like athletics or performance in general, is that ability to, like you said, plan, execute, and then reflect and strategize based on those observations around how you did. So, um, yeah, coming back to strength. Yeah, I think the main thing that I would say is like strength is resilient, and strength has an ability to both absorb and create.
Mm. Yeah, the bend not break
Mm-hmm.
idea.
Yeah.
What can I allow to come in? What have I seen before?
Yep.
What have I exposed myself to and gotten past? Do you have an example of someone in any stage of your life where you're like, that person's strong, I want to be like them?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the first person that comes to mind is my dad. Um, from a really young age, he modeled a lot of the things that I've seen to be both in my own life and in the lives of other people that I consider successful, just aspects of how to live, which, I mean, consistency, showing up regularly, predictably, um, and with that consistency, the effort behind giving your best, and knowing that your best might not be your 100% every day, and that understanding that is okay. Um, it's still important to give what you have. Um, and he was just a quiet leader. So I think there was an element of that kind of lead by example that I also really picked up from him, that I've always appreciated somebody who's willing to get out there and do what they think is right, what they think is best, and not be afraid of getting some feedback and taking the consequences, as well as the benefits, the positives that come out of being a leader.
Very cool. I like the idea of leading by example. Um, Being able to let the actions that you demonstrate like speak louder than the words you say has always been something that I've really resonated with, and it's about really like taking action, right? And but taking action through your um, not just talking, but by doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that is like taking action is a mantra of mine. It's something that I value and something that we all, I know, value to some extent. And it makes me think about like the other things in life that we value. And Gunnar and I have talked a lot about values on our podcast, things that are important to us, growth, self-responsibility, of course, right? And it makes me curious and wonder more about like values that are important to you. Obviously, resilience, that's an important value. Leading by action, like you've shared already. Is there anything else that's specific or unique to your life that you find is really valuable to you?
I mean, I would first just echo what you guys both said. I mean, certainly self responsibility, self accountability, um, and growth. I think naturally comes out of that when you are able to practice self responsibility and accountability. You're willing to look at your downsides, your shortcomings, the things that you might not do as well as you want to, and take the steps to get better at doing those things. Um, Communication and relationships continues to be like having a high level of integrity around those parts of my life, continuing to show up and be present. That's a big one, is being present to where I am. I mean, if I'm going to make the choice to spend my time somewhere with somebody or doing something, really making the best of that time as well as I'm able is just a really important way for me to know that I'm in alignment with the choices that I'm making. If I can really show up and be present, I know that's a pretty good litmus test for me to feel confident that I'm where I'm supposed to be and where I'm supposed to be in the sense of where I want to be. Um, yeah, so I'd say those ones would be the other main values.
I love it. As Andrew mentioned, values that we can put out in front of us. I imagine you've written these down many, many times. That active practice of putting them in front of you allows those values to show up more often in our actions and our thoughts and our words. Hearing you talk earlier, uh, one mantra that I use every day is I own my effort,
Mm.
whatever it is. And right now I'm preparing for what I would say is the biggest competition of my career as a CrossFit athlete. And every day is different, yet I can show up with my effort. And if I give my best on the day, I will increase my capacity. I will acquire new skills because my focus is there, and presence is a is matched with the effort that you put into it. So if you are in a relationship that's meaningful, the presence you have there really matches the effort you put into that relationship. So all of what you're saying there is clearly why we brought you on this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would just jump in with one more, like living with intention, like bringing that intention to your presence as well. I think is a really great way that you can show up fully and live from both that full cup that you also show up to fill for yourself, so that you have the ability to give in the ways that are most meaningful and um, yeah, or just allow you to live the way you want to.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I like that because what you said, like valuing being present, and that takes like you have to be pay attention, right? You have to be aware
Mm-hmm.
of your attention, right, and where that's going. But um, and then from there, like you can be intentional about whatever it is that you want to do. For me,
Yeah.
that makes me think of like awareness and mindfulness. I create a distinction between the two, like awareness, like being something like that we are now conscious of, maybe we were unaware of before. It's now in
Mm-hmm.
our mind, it's in our sphere, our ether, right? Whereas like mindfulness is then choosing to act with that new level of awareness we have. It's like it's being intentional about what you're doing. So I love that. I mean, you and I, we talk about that from time to time when we get on calls together, and that's awesome. That's yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Well, with that, you guys have been talking as mentor, mentee, friend role now for a while.
Friends.
Um, Friends, we're all friends.
Mhm.
Everybody's
I'm
friend.
curious. Everybody love everybody. Uh, I'm curious, Ben, what your initial well, when you were going through the strong coach and you're given a mentor,
Mhm.
what was that period of time like for you? Because I imagine everything we've talked about probably all filtered into one moment or several moments over what was 12 weeks when we all went through it. And then you met Andrew. So I'm curious, like where you were when that experience came about for you.
Just the experience of being assigned Andrew as my mentor. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Let the people know.
Let the people know. I think it was it like week 3, 4, Andrew, something like that.
I think that's around the time
And
the mentors are introduced. Yeah.
yeah, um, I mean, I don't have a super clear like recollection of our first call or anything as standing out, but I remember learning that we were going to get mentors and being like, "Oh, this is how they do the accountability thing." And at first, it was a little bit like I'm an oldest child, and I wouldn't say I have like an authority problem, but maybe like a resistance over the years to, and it's certainly been something that I've navigated in athlete coach relationships. And um, this was another opportunity, a unique opportunity, really, to get to meet somebody who I imagine coming in was going to have a lot of alignment with and really understanding of where I was at in both my process with my business and what I was hoping to receive out of the strong coach. And then also just as we got to know each other like early on, it was clear there was a lot of carryover in some of our training philosophies as well. So just feeling really fortunate that we just matched up as well as we did, both personality wise, interest wise. Um, and then the way that I remember feeling sort of nervous about how like the check-ins were going to go at the beginning of when we first started having calls, and then towards the end of the 12 weeks, last probably 3 or 4 calls, I was just like, I felt really solid both in reporting things that had been awesome and wins to celebrate, as well as challenges and obstacles, because we developed this trusting relationship through the avenue of just being curious and authentic. And Andrew definitely came in with a goal of helping, and that was very clear in the way that he communicated. And it it was a challenge for me to believe that not in the sense that like believe that like I deserved it. That's kind of hard for me to accept for myself, that like, oh, I'm deserving of this help, even though number one, I'm in a coaching program that I'm paying for. And I just didn't want it to seem inauthentic or um, forced, and it never was. It was a growing, developed, tiered experience that has led us to having an awesome friendship. And it came out of just the curious authenticity that I think Andrew brought to the experience, and that like I was invested in getting the most out of the experience that I could, and that meant listening and being curious about what I can do better, asking for advice, asking questions that I thought were dumb at times when I didn't know the answers already, and maybe had an expectation that I should, and just getting support and receiving that was a really cool experience for me.
Right on. Well, Andrew's he told me earlier that he used to drive a Volkswagen bus, and those tires are absolutely pumped right now. So uh, love it. uh,
That's right.
no, that's a wonderful way to put it. Thank you for articulating that experience, because I was fortunate to have a mentor in the program, and then I was Andrew's mentor at that progression timeline, and it was the same thing. Like as the mentor, given that role, I felt a lot of pressure
Mm-hmm.
and somewhat some anxiety, just not trusting myself fully. And as soon as I got on the first call, I was like, it's not about any of this stuff. It's about, am I showing up and being present? And look where we are now. We have 23 episodes of a podcast together, almost 2 full years
Heck yeah.
later. So how about it?
Yeah, I mean,
That's what it's all
it's so
about.
cool to yeah, it's so cool to see that this is, what has manifested out of that. What started off
Mm-hmm.
as like a simple mentor-mentee relationship has turned into beautiful friendships. It's turned into a podcast that is growing in terms of episodes and listeners and whatnot. And man, to look back 2 years ago, or a little less than 2 years ago, and to think like, wow, would I be here today? Like what I was talking about earlier, like think back and reflect, like, whoa, here I am talking with my quote unquote mentee and mentor on a podcast. And it's like, whoa, right? It's always fun to have these moments and be appreciative of it.
Absolutely.
Echo that.
hmm Well, I feel like this is like having the three of us on together on this call is so cool because I imagine we all got paired up for a reason, and I think all three of us have a lot of like similarities in like who we are as people and as individuals, and we bring a lot of similarities to the table, but we also have some some differences as well. So it's always fun to be able to connect and draw those connections or make those connections with other people. So um, yeah, anything you want to add, Gunnar?
Again, great points. I am curious to do a little more reflection with you, Ben. Um, what's your relationship with the word regret?
Ooh, regret.
Gunnar likes to do this. He likes to put people on the spot with questions.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
typically do this with Andrew, and he sucks too. But yeah, I've been told one of my greatest skills is question asking. So
Nice. That's,
I appreciate you taking time to
it's a
think about
superpower. No problem. Regrets. What are my thoughts on regrets? I think regrets happen the most when we struggle to accept something that's happened. And I know in my experience in my life, accepting how my expectations of what I thought certain parts of my life were going to be like, whether it was in relationships, professional, um, athletic to an extent, during the time that I was a more competitive athlete, accepting change and things that happen that create change can be really difficult. And once we accept something, we're able to hopefully learn the lesson, whatever that is, that's there to glean and take away and use as another lens, another layer to sort of filter things through the next time we have an experience where that information, whatever that lesson is, can become useful. And so I think regret is a choice, at the end of the day. And maybe I'm leaving out a section of this where it's something is completely out of our control, that creates a situation in which we wish didn't happen, and maybe we can just kind of put a little asterisk next to that one, because I think a lot of times we do have a lot more control over our life and our situation, our mindset, than we give ourselves credit for, or that we put into action, because it can be hard and scary, and it requires a full, or at least enough willingness to trust oneself to take that step, whatever it is. So, yeah, I think for the most part, regrets are a way to describe things that we are still, I would imagine, working through in some regard.
appreciate that. Andrew,
Andrew looks pensive.
anything?
Well, I was thinking about like I was answering the question. I was listening to what you were saying, and I was also somewhat like answering the question in my mind as
Mm-hmm.
well, as far as like, what are regrets, and I think that regrets are basically like very similar to what you're saying. Like they're things that you haven't like learned from, or there's something that you're still holding on to, right? Um, it's it's something that you may have wished had gone differently, although something different happened, right? And a regret, I kind of think of it like as a mindset around a specific situation, and we can change that. We can obviously change the past based off of how we perceive it. I mean, not maybe not what literally happened, but our experience of how we feel about it, right? And when we have had an experience that wasn't what we may have anticipated it to be, there can leave that feeling of regret. So I was thinking in my mind as you were answering that, like, wow, like regrets, like you said, it's a choice, right? And at the end of the day, you can have regrets, but you can also look at it as a situation that you may have something you learn from it, something you can take away from it, and then grow and become a better individual in the future because of it, right? And yeah, that was my thoughts on regrets. I mean, I know it's something that it's a tough topic, because when we think of regrets, we think of all the things that we maybe haven't done, and we dwell on the past, and we get stuck in that state of mind where we're thinking about things that have already happened. And like you said earlier, it takes us away from that present state. And when we are placing our attention on things that have happened in the past, it really um, it it doesn't allow us to have like an idea of what's going to happen in the future, or like plan out the future, have goals. It doesn't allow us to be in the present moment and enjoy the beauty that could be present with you. And so it's sometimes it's easier said than done. The situation can vary based off of whatever may have transpired. Although regret is like, I think you said it well. It's a choice, and it's a decision to stay stuck in a certain state of mind.
And I mean, that's the work, right? Is when you don't want to change, when things feel really stuck. I mean, that's where being willing to sit with those feelings, do the work of connecting to maybe where you feel them in your body, using some strategies to self-soothe and help you move through that experience in a way that doesn't sort of reinforce whatever loop is keeping you stuck there. That's
Mm-hmm.
it's a really challenging thing to do. We're hardwired to stay comfy, and
Yeah.
uh, it can be some pretty strong signals to try to butt back against when it's happening in the moment.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious, do you have like any particular tools that you like to use when you're maybe feeling this way, um, to help you work through or navigate these types of feelings?
Yeah, I tend to just pretty quickly go to my breath, and having an awareness through the type of training that I do that really does give me a little bit more sensitivity, I think, to the position that my body's in and the way it's moving. That can be a really helpful way to just get a few seconds of where's my breathing? Is it up in my chest, or am I down in my diaphragm? And just something as simple as that, drawing awareness to it, and then being mindful. I love the distinction that you made there, Andy, to take action on it by putting something into practice, whether it's 3 just kind of slow breaths. I mean, thinking about a long inhale and a slower exhale. I mean, that slower exhale is going to help down regulate the body and bring you back to that parasympathetic state. So um, yeah, being willing to just do those things, whatever the situation is. If it's saying, "Hey, I need a quick minute" to somebody, or just literally standing there for 15 seconds and breathing before you say something, like it doesn't really matter as long as it happens. So Yeah, breath work is definitely the quick one that I get, or the most immediate accessible one that I think we all have available to us. Then it's where I definitely default to.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, since you mentioned the question, Gunner, I want to throw this one back to you. What's your relationship with regret?
Admittedly, all of the things both of you said were not what I was thinking about when I asked the question. However, they both line up really well to my relationship with regret. So, looking at it from it's a choice, it's an awareness. It can sometimes show up as an emotion or a held on belief about something. And for me, uh, the last 3 years of my life, there have been some real distinct moments where I was able to detach from the environment, think to myself, if I do this or if I do not do this, will I regret it?
Mm-hmm.
And having that awareness in the moment, and that's a practice, right? I think everything we've talked about today is an ongoing practice. Mindfulness is a practice; it's not an end state. We're always able to practice it. So regret comes back to that of what do I want, knowing my values, who do I want to be now, who do I want to be in the future, is this opportunity going to come up again, or is this opportunity not fitting all of those other values? So
Mm-hmm.
for me, regret is I've had regrets in my life, and that is actually an inspiring thing for me, is to go, damn, I let that happen once. I do not want to experience that
Mm-hmm.
again. So it's using that awareness of, all right, I felt this before. I can recall that. That helps me make decisions going forward. So regret to me is now a framework of mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Will I regret taking this action? Will I regret not taking this action? And giving that black and white to what could be something very gray. So regret is in my current state, my current life is an incredible tool because I'm doing this competition coming up. I know this episode will be released after the competition. However, there were a lot of things that went into me making the decision to accept going to this competition. Personal things, expense things, all of these pieces. Yet I have structured my life to lead up to this point. I've moved across the country twice in 3 years. I've put 7 hours a day of training for the last 5 months specifically to go to this level. And what would that all be for if I didn't give myself the opportunity? So that regret currently is I'm doing everything I can to show up with my best so that I don't experience things I've experienced in the past because they're so poignant and so real. Um, because I also allowed myself to be present in those moments of regret. Like, damn, I missed the mark that I set for myself. And that standard that I want to live with, that I want to exemplify and show to all my clients and all my relationships with. The regret is actually like, okay, it's pushing me forward to be even better, to live my values stronger, to have integrity with my word and build from there. So I like the idea of that it's a choice. The way I was framing it is it's the choice in the present moment. Will I regret this? Will I not?
Gunnar, I really like the way that you were able to describe that, and very much appreciate the perspective that you're coming to it with, because I think you're getting out of it sort of the same outcome that maybe Andrew and I were alluding to, with using it as a tool and using it as
Mm-hmm.
something that allows you to make different decisions, hopefully better decisions based on a past experience. And I think that's like, if you're not doing that, what are you basing your new actions on?
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That is very succinct and powerful there. With that, I think it's a good opportunity to land the plane here.
Awesome.
Right at kind of our set time. Ben, thank you so much for being here. This has been a fantastic opportunity to get to know you on my end,
Yeah.
and for Andrew to show what his mentee is doing out in the world.
Crushing it,
um,
killing it.
where can people find you, Ben?
So at Revive Bodywork PT, the PT stands for personal training, not physical therapy. So that's my Instagram. Also, Ben McAnnis_Entenman is my personal IG handle. And I do keep them fairly separate, just in the sense of, like, I might show more of what like my weekend hike experiences were like on my personal one, versus necessarily sharing all of that on my business one. That's the best place to find me, is on social media, on Instagram. Um, yeah, website is still under construction, so when the platform launches, hopefully end of the quarter, that'll be up as well. So that'll be a much more clear funneled experience, and have some other resources on there that I'm pretty excited about as well. So, but yeah, for now, good old IG.
Let's go. Let's go. Andrew, how about you?
Listeners, you can find me on Instagram as well at andrew.swayze. Simple as that. You can also, if you want to find me for training in the city of San Diego, I work out of my studio in Pacific Beach. My Instagram handle is Swayze_fitness.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. And just to put this back out there, Ben, you are in Bend, Oregon.
Correct.
If people are
Ben
interested in
from
the training.
Bend. Thanks so much for
Perfect.
having me
What
on,
a map
guys. It's
break.
been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can find me at Gunnar Regan on Instagram, or my coaching page at Animus Coach. Um, Again, we appreciate you listening to this. Please like and subscribe to the As Above Solo podcast, and we will catch you on the next time. Peace.